What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets'd podcast. Today, we took some of your guys' questions on Twitter, and we're doing a buy or sell episode. We got questions about the pitching rotation. We got questions about positional paddles. We got questions about Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Mark Vientos. A lot of other fun stuff that we're going to get to later. But first, before we get started, make sure you guys are following us on all of our social media at Mets'd. That's Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. If you guys aren't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please check us out over there at Mets'd. We are trying to get 10,000 subscribers as soon as we possibly can. We want to do it by opening day. Big ask. We got 10 days left, but hey, only a couple hundred more subscribers, so we want to get there for opening day. But before we get into these questions, Mark, you put these together. Any surprises in here for me?
I think there's a couple fun ones in there. They're not necessarily all related to like player performance or whatnot. There's a couple more vibes things on here, which does fit the podcast a little bit more. But a lot of good questions from the people. We got like 100+ replies to the tweet, so really appreciate everybody showing the support, helping us out with this piece of content here. And I think we could get it started off here with the man, the real Bink One. He says, starting off with a heater, Sandy Alcantara will be a part of the Mets rotation after the trade deadline. I'm going to start off by saying sell. I don't think that Sandy Alcantara is going to become a Met. I think that there's just teams that are going to give way better offers. I don't think the Mets are going to have even close to one of the best offers for a guy like Sandy Alcantara.
That was a serious heater. I also do have to sell that. I think there's a really good chance that the Mets do start to at least make some inroads, to try and make some inroads to get some pitchers as the summer moves on, if we're in the race like we expect to be. I just don't know if they're going to be shopping in the Sandy Alcantara bucket, because I think that's something that's kind of underscored this entire offseason, the entire last year of Mets baseball, is a growing confidence in what we're able to do right now with pitching development, the minor league pitching prospects that we have. You guys saw it on display on Sunday in the spring breakout game. You heard us talking about a lot of these undersold pitching prospects in the episode yesterday. Like, I think we just have a lot of depth that's forming, and maybe Sandy is the one, because maybe they do want to bring an ace, get the hammer over the top at some point, but I can't see them making that move now immediately this year.
Yeah, and again, I think like teams like the Orioles and the Red Sox and some of the other teams in the American League and even some of the teams in the National League, I think might have better younger prospects right now towards the top of just farm systems in all of Major League Baseball, rather than the Mets, who we have a lot of guys right now that are a little bit further away. I mean, it seems like the Marlins are looking for like top end talent when they're going to be moving a guy like Sandy Alcantara, which I fully expect they move him as soon as he's good and shows it this year. Like, it's probably going to happen even before the trade deadline, honestly.
Yeah, I almost think it benefits them to trade him earlier. Like, start taking calls in June. Like, why not just give another team as much Sandy Alcantara as they want? But moving on here from the Andrew Bello, or Bello, Bello. I'm going to go with Bello, the Andrew Bello. I don't care how good he looks. Once we get some of the starting pitching back healthy, McGill should go to the bullpen. I think I'm going to sell that one as well, because at some point, even when pitchers come back healthy, like Minaya and Montes both come back by July 1st, they're both cruising in the rotation, we're good to go. Then it becomes a mix of McGill, Canning, Blackburn for 2 spots, as long as nobody else has gotten hurt. I think there's a good chance that McGill might be the best one in that entire mix. I think that we've seen, like, the last few years, like the incremental growth that he's made, how good this fastball is, what the new sinker is, showing off the splitter, the slider. Like, I think he has enough. And I say this over and over again. I've been saying almost every episode now. I think he has enough to be a legitimate starting pitcher in this league. And I believe that internally the Mets feel that way too.
Yeah, I still think at the end of the day, McGill's best right now as a reliever in that long reliever role. Like, I think that is where he will be the most valuable to this team if everything is going right. But we know that this rotation has been hurt already. We know there's going to be injuries during the season. That's just how baseball goes. If Tyler McGill's pitching well, there's no reason to move him to the bullpen, especially if there are some other guys, I'm sure, that will be going through some cold streaks or maybe need a rest to skip a start here and there. I think the Tyler McGill bullpen scenario is kind of a bit, I don't want to say dead this season, but it seems unlikely considering how the Mets have gone about pitching this offseason, and just David Stern's teams in general have done that in the past. So I'm going to sell that one as well. But it's definitely something that we've been pushing a lot in the past. We've got another one here from Newman the Trader. Great name. Love that. Lindor, Vientos, Alonso, and Soto. 30 home runs each. I got to buy this one. I think that's totally within the realm of possibility. I think all 4 of those guys should and could hit 30 home runs this year, without a doubt.
I think if you bump that down to like 27, I think that's like one of the biggest buys we could ever have, possibly of all time. I think really, besides injury, like in terms of just player production and expectations, it's a good chance all of those guys get to 30 home runs. I guess Lindor and Vientos are the ones who are the closest to not getting there, just because for Vientos it's swing and miss, and Lindor it's just like 2 of those doubles don't become home runs. Like, that's only the difference. But I think that's a big buy for us.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that. I mean, it would be bad if they don't.
Yeah. Next one here from Cup of Mets. Mets get into 2+ fistfights this season. I can't buy that. If you set the line at over a half, I would say yes, probably one. But 2 fights to me seems like a lot of fights for a baseball team in a season.
Buy. I'm all in. You know, I always want the Mets fighting. You know, I want a little more passion in that way. The Mets were like so lovey-dovey last year. They were happy. They started the year crazy. Rhys Hoskins got them going. I think the Mets are going to be a little scrappy again this year. I think we're going to see 2 fights. I think we're going to see 2 fights with the Mets, and I think one of them, Mets Phillies, I think are going to brawl this year. I think it's coming.
I can see that. So if the Mets and Phillies are one fight, I do think that in terms of guys who were on this team now that weren't on this team last year, especially for the whole year, Jesse Winker and Jose Siri are both definitely instigators in and of themselves. So I think that there's a good chance those two can help some instigation happen for the other team. That's something new. That's a new wrinkle. I'll give you that one.
You also got to remember that Jose Siri, with his bat flips alone, will get at least 6 pitchers pissed off this year. And that means that's 6 pitchers who might throw out the next guy that comes to the plate. And if they do, that's a guaranteed brawl.
Yeah, nailed it.
All right, next up, we've got Joe DeMayo, friend of the podcast, PSL to Flushing. Clay Holmes, all-star. That might not even be a hot take anymore. I'll tell you this. I'm gonna be the loser here, and I'm gonna sell. And the only reason being is I want to temper expectations, and I want to say sell. But wow, if we get the Clay Holmes that we're seeing in spring training, yes, this guy will be an all-star. There's no doubt in my mind. But I'll sell just to be like a negative Nancy and be maybe like one of the calmer heads in the room right now.
I'll even say this. I'll definitely sell it too for similar reasons. I don't want to overdo the Clay Holmes stuff. I just did my top 50 starting pitchers fantasy baseball, and he was just outside the top 50. But based on the way Clay Holmes' season might take shape, the fact that we have some big injuries early and we're going to have to lean on him early, we might have to push a good chunk of all the innings he can pitch this season to before the All-Star break, just because, again, we don't have other guys healthy. So if he gets to a good amount of innings before the All-Star break, and the ERA is in the low 3s, and the strikeout rate is like 28, 29%, which I think is all entirely possible, not the craziest thing for Clay Holmes to be an all-star. Also because Major League Baseball loves stories like that. They'd love to be like, Clay Holmes, all-star, first year in a starting rotation after being the Yankees closer for the Mets. Like, that would be something that would definitely be able to be just, to use the parlance of this show, bought and sold during All-Star week. So I think that could be funny. All-star still is a bit of a stretch, though, for what Clay Holmes is. But next one here from Bobo season. I'm not going to say you're at, but you know who you are. Grimace has to leave. It's time for the Hamburglar. I mean, I do love the hamburger. I'm a big hamburger guy, but I do think I have to sell that as well because I don't know if the Hamburglar has as much panache as Grimace does. And I'm certain that we're going to see plenty of Grimace around the ballpark this year. Probably a little too much Grimace around the ballpark early in the season. I can almost guarantee that.
And that's exactly why I'm buying this take. We know that I had this take last year. We know I was a cranky old man when they put the Grimace seed in. I'm in. Give me the Hamburglar. It's time to keep pumping McDonald's tires even more because we know that they need all the free advertising that they could get. $billion corporation, thousands of restaurants across the world. Give me the Hamburglar. That guy's got aura. All right. Next up, we have got from SHYNY, Yordi, appreciate you. Jose Siri will have a breakout 4+ WAR season. He will still strike out a ton and have a low batting average, but I think he hits 30 homers, steals close to 30 bases, and plays platinum caliber glove defense to have the best season of his career at the bottom of the Mets lineup. I'm gonna say something crazy. I love the take. I love it. It's absolute chaos that you think he's gonna hit 30 homers, but he does. There's 2 things that he does well, and there's no doubt about it. He barrels when he hits the baseball. He barrels it. Elite barrel rates when the bat touches ball. He also strikes out a ton. He also plays phenomenal defense, some of the best defense in all of Major League Baseball. We saw him a couple years ago with the Rays back in 2023. Hit 25 homers, finished with a 761 OPS plus at 105. I don't know how much better he can be than that. And he was worth about 2.5 WAR then, just because he still doesn't get on base, doesn't put the ball in play enough. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to sell, but I love the idea. I love where we're thinking.
Yeah, I don't think the 4 WAR is actually the craziest thing on there. I think the 30 home runs, the 30 stolen bases, I think that's like borderline impossible. But if he could do something like what I know this is your boy, but like if like Ezekiel Tovar did last year, where like the stats did seem kind of good, like the counting stats, the 25 homers, and a 270 average, but it was a 295 on base percentage. If Jose Siri can have like a 310 on base, play platinum glove defense, and hit 20 home runs, that's probably a 3 WAR season. So we're not really very far off from what this actually is. So same thing like a guy like Brenton Doyle last year, who just came out of kind of nowhere, played platinum glove defense with 20 homers and 30 steals. If it was like 20 homers and 20 steals of platinum glove defense, again, that's like a 3 WAR player, and that's suddenly something that worked out really, really well. But the only thing with that is I think that WAR not the thing. WAR is a compiling stat. To accumulate a lot of WAR, you got to be playing every single day. That's how you accumulate WAR. I just think that unless Jose Siri hits the piss out of the ball from the get-go, no nonstop early in the season, I don't think he's going to get like a pure, unvarnished starting job on this team. I think Tyrone Taylor will get his time in center field. I think the Mets are going to be pretty steadfast about that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
All right, so I'm now moving on. We got Charles Wilson at C.A. Wisson. Lindor will make his first All-Star appearance as a Met this year, and the Mets offense will hit 200 home runs and steal 100 bases. I think I'm very easily going to buy that because first of all, the Mets offense did that last year. Last year we had 207 home runs and 106 stolen bases as a team. And it's egregious that Francisco Lindor hasn't made an All-Star game yet. I know a big part of that is because he just has cold, slow starts to the season, but still, I think at some point, Major League Baseball has to be like, we should get this guy who's a true ambassador of our game, one of the biggest stars we have, to the All-Star game for one time when he plays in the biggest market on earth.
Yeah, I'll even flip it, and I'll say he's definitely going to be an all-star. And I think the hot take here would be that the Mets lead Major League Baseball in home runs, and that they steal. I mean, what's a crazy amount of bases? Because listen, I think it's in the realm of possibility. They added Juan Soto to the lineup, and they were about 30 off the lead last year. So I think there's definitely a possibility where the Mets could theoretically lead Major League Baseball in home runs. I'm buying this take all over the place. They're going to steal more bases too, I think, this year. So they're going to be a little more athletic. I like that a lot from old Charles Wilson. Our next one here comes from Young B. He says Brett Baty will be a better player than Vientos in 2025. I'm all about the Brett Baty, bandwagon. Mr. March, we love Brett Baty over here, but I am going to have to sell this one. I can see a world where that theoretically happens. It's not a planet that doesn't exist. It's not Pluto. It didn't get blasted off and become a dwarf. But I think that there is a world where Brett Baty could be a very productive player, and Mark Vientos takes a little bit of a step back. But I think it's so hard for him to be better than Vientos going into this season, especially playing a new position. That feels impossible.
The new position is the part that kind of screws it up because I just doubt that Brett Baty will be a good defensive second baseman right off the bat. Yeah. We talked about that in the last episode, but I do think if we had parallel universes going on where and there was one universe where the Mets had the exact same team and Mark Vientos third baseman, another parallel universe where the Mets had the exact same team, Brett Baty's a third baseman. Because Baty is so much better at defense than Mark Vientos, and because Mark Vientos, while he still has the amazing power and all the star potential, there's still a lot of holes in his on-base ability, so swings and misses a lot. There's a chance that Mark Vientos this year could have a 305 on base with 25 homers and play bad defense and be a 1-2 win player. Whereas Brett Baty can meander his way to 15 homers, a 240 average, 320 on base, play really good defense, and probably also be about a 2-win player. It's not as sexy and it's not as fun, but there are a lot of different ways to again accumulate WAR. I think that is, if that's where I'm getting the crux of this question from, is more valuable player. My mind immediately goes to wins above replacement. I think that is something that's oddly more possible than it would seem on the surface, but just because those guys have such different player profiles at this point.
No, totally like that. I think that's a sane take.
All right. Next up, we got Chris, New Yorker in the Midwest at NYM Mets fan. Frankie Montas comes back from his injury and becomes a major part of the playoff run for this season. That's what I'm buying hard. I'm still very much in the Frankie Montas train, despite the fact that he's going to be injured and start season on the IL. I think the Mets went after him for a reason. I think they circled him and they were went out to go get him as soon as they possibly could because they simply wanted him here and they see real potential in him.
Yeah, no, I totally buy this one too. I think Frankie Montas is a big part of this team moving forward for the next couple seasons here. Like you said, they were aggressive. And you texted me you had a little bit of a brain blast today because Griffin Canning, for context, pitched amazing in his next spring training start against the Rays. They get 13 whiffs, struck out 9 guys. He was phenomenal. And you had a brain blast, so go ahead and share it with the people at home what that theory was as to why the Mets were maybe so aggressive with guys like Montas and Griffin Canning.
And Clay Holmes. But I was talking to my buddy Ryan about just the Mets offseason, the shape of the Mets season that was beginning to take place, seeing Griffin Canning. He was he gave the Mets a lot of credit. 3 years ago, we were the team that were going to let a guy like Griff Canning go and watch him flourish with another team. Now we're the team that can take a guy like this in, and we're not even surprised when we see him elevate. And I think that there's a reason why the Mets circled a bunch of these guys and went out and got them early in the offseason. A lot of people gave them crap about a month and a half ago now at this point when someone like Jack Flaherty kind of floundered on the free agent market and wound up signing for a contract for the 2025 season that was only about $7-8 million higher than what Frankie Montas is due this season. But I think a reason for that, a reason specifically that the Mets went out and got these guys early, is that we're seeing so much professional development happening right now with these Mets pitchers. And I think that helps a lot for these pitchers coming to a new organization to be signed early, get their personalized plans from Mets player development, have conversations with Hefner and Yeagers and the rest of the pitching coaches and people on staff, and be able to start working these these training regimens and these measures into their off-season plan, and then getting to camp as soon as possible with the plan already in place, with certain things already being worked on, and then you can enact said plan much sooner. So we're seeing a guy like Canning who's changed parts of his windup, who's changing where he stands on the mound, who's changing his pitch mix, changing the way some of his pitches move, especially changing his sequencing and the way he's using each pitch and in which count to which handed batter. Things like that don't really happen overnight. These are learned processes for these players. So the fact I think the Mets went out and got these guys early, Montes Canning and Clay Holmes, shows that there were really specific plans they had in place for how they were going to maximize their abilities. That's why I think a guy like Frankie Montes, who tinkered so much last year when he went to the Brewers, just in his first start last year when he went to the Brewers from the it was the Reds. When he started the season with the Reds, he threw more sinkers than cutters. It was the first time he'd done that this year. He took his slider totally out of his repertoire. He pushed up his four-seam fastball percentage with 2 strikes heavily. It was just they made so many changes in such a short period of time, and I figured the Mets had a lot of other plans for Frankie Montes too. We haven't gotten to see yet, but I do think that everything that this team is doing right now, especially pitching wise, is incredibly intentional. And I think that's a reason that they were so, again, in air quote, jumpy this offseason to get guys in quickly to see how much can happen in a short period of time.
Yeah, no, I think it makes total sense, and especially with, again, the Mets really making these changes with these guys. They want to make sure that they're working the way that they want them to, focus on the things that they want them to. And the earlier that you get them started, the better it is. We saw it last year with Severino, and he even talked about it on Foul Territory, where he mentioned how he loved how the Mets training staff was able to work with him very quickly. They were amazing. They kept him so healthy. He couldn't believe it. He was like, this is the best trainers I've ever dealt with in the world. So I think the Mets want to be very, very proactive with their guys that they're going to be relying on to throw all these innings to make sure that they're working, I'm going to say this in quotation marks, like the Mets way or the Mets plan.
Yeah, there's something about like with player development, with development in any industry, not just baseball. Like you don't want people to develop bad habits. So the sooner you start teaching people quote unquote good habits, then the quicker they can kind of become the versions of them that are expected and that in this situation that you paid for. And I think that is something that is really relevant that's been going on with this Mets professional development of pitching the last few years.
All right. Next one we got here comes from Uncle Weg, loyal listener and viewer of the podcast. He says, Mets are top 5 in attendance. I think the Mets are going to see a significant bump, but I am going to sell that. So last year, the top 5 teams in attendance were the Dodgers, Phillies, Padres, Yankees, Braves. To get to that top 5 last year, you need to have over 3 million at the gate. That's an average of about 37,000 people at the stadium per game. The Mets last year were towards the bottom half of the league. They averaged about 28,000 per game, 2.3 million. What is Citi Field's even capacity? It's, I think, like 42,000 maybe?
I was going to say 38,000.
41,800. That's pretty much the capacity. So they're going to have to be close to sold out for every single home game to get there. I don't see it. I don't see it happening. I think they will be significantly higher than they were last year. Season ticket sales were up. When you bring in Juan Soto, you're going to get more people there. But I am going to sell being top 5. It's just a lot of seats, and the Mets just don't have that much capacity.
Can you check the capacity of those stadiums while I talk about this too for a second? But I do, another reason I'm selling this, something I've talked about with you privately, something I've mentioned a few times in the podcast. The Mets don't have any home weekend games against the rivals this year. And the home series against the Yankees for the Subway Series is during 4th of July weekend, when most New Yorkers are going to be down the shore, Hamptons, out of town, all this stuff. But the Mets do not play a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday game against the Phillies or Braves in Citi Field this entire season. And I think those are games that when you're a schedule maker, you circle like, oh, we're going to pack Citi Field this night. And those are the games I think, as for fans, are the most fun to be at because we hate our rivals hate us. Those are games that are going to be monumentally important as we fight for the NL East this year. And the fact that there are none of them happening on a weekend at night at Citi Field, that's probably just like a tiny little thing that will affect how many seats we're able to fill as the season goes on. But I just can't imagine a weekend series against the Mariners gets as many tickets as a weekend series against the Phillies. As for the Mets, I don't think it ever will.
So I'll say this, looking at those top 5 teams, so Dodgers, clearly the biggest stadium in baseball, 56,000, they're number 1. The Yankees are at number 5 at 46,000. I thought they had closer to 50. That number doesn't feel as high as it should be. Mets ranked 11th at 41,922, right behind the Phillies, who were at 42,900. We're also a top 5 team. The Braves, I believe, are the only team in the top. Braves and Padres are the other 2 teams in the top 5 that have a smaller ballpark. But we know the Padres sold out basically every single game last year. Those fans were going absolutely crazy. It's also the only major sport in that town. So people are major Padres fans. I'm going to tell you this. I've been to Braves games. It's never full. I think they're fudging those numbers. There's absolutely no way that they're getting that many fans. We went to a Braves game a couple years ago, and it was close to empty at the end of the season. There's absolutely no shot they're counting ticketed people coming in the front door and giving that correctly, because they are Truist Park's 41,000, like basically flat. I don't see, they're not missing 4,000 people every single game. That's a load of shit. I don't believe it.
Are you accusing the Braves on large scale of ticket malfeasance right now?
Fraud. The Braves are committing fraud. Those are not real numbers. They're fudging it so they can have higher revenue. I don't know why they would fudge it, but
there's no reason to fudge it.
Yeah,
they get nothing for fudging that. I mean, I guess possible, but let's shoot for the Mets being top 10. Where we have 11th most capacity for any team in the league. Let's shoot for being top 10 this year. Yes. I also think that fans coming to the ballpark will lag a little bit after success. I remember when Steve Cohen made those comments that were like a little bit out of touch a month ago.
Yes.
He said the team started winning. We had such a great season. No one was at the ballpark down the stretch. I do think that's just simply a year behind. Like, I think if this Mets team continues to play well through the early part of the summer, by the time we get to June, Citi Field's going to be a zoo, like almost every single home game, every single week. Maybe besides Monday and Tuesday. But once the kids get out of school,
yes,
it's going to be a madhouse there. And that's something I'm extra excited for this season.
Love that. I can't wait.
All right. Next question from Fish at Fish A. Brett Baty will keep the starting second base job.
What was that at? What was his at again?
Fish A.
Nice.
FISHAYY _. Part of me I have to sell that because I still believe in Jeff McNeil. I think I'm squarely on the Jeff McNeil resurgence bandwagon right now, but it's not totally out of bounds. If Brett Baty just walks in, he finally realized how to hit. He's probably like the same player, if not a little bit better than Jeff McNeil at that point. I think Jeff McNeil still, at this point in the career, is a good defender, no longer a great one. I think Brett Baty's best case scenario is being a good defender rather than a bad one. If they're kind of not that different on defense, and then Brett Baty happens to be a little bit better on offense, then I guess why not at that point, right?
Here's going to be my hot take. I'm going to buy it. Here's why. It's real crazy brain. Brett Baty plays well. Love it. Awesome. Fantastic. He plays well enough to play second base every single day. Brandon Nimmo's got the plantar fasciitis. He's got the back. He's got the knee. He's going to be DHing a lot. Jeff McNeil can play the outfield. Jeff McNeil plays the outfield really well. That's how he finds himself back into this lineup a little bit more, is through the outfield. Brett Baty wins the second base spot. Turns into a little Mike Moustakas over there when the Reds brought him in to play second base. Jeff McNeil becomes a super utility man, which is the perfect role for him. That's truthfully what you want him doing, is playing a bunch of different positions every single day. And Brandon Nimmo probably DHs a little bit more than maybe we expected this year. He's already starting the year possibly DHing. So I think that's a good way to solve all these problems, and everybody does well. I'm buying.
Brandon Nimmo did get into the field on the last spring training game on Monday, so I think that was something. But there's still kind of mum about him where he's gonna wind up this year. And then as far as McNeil in the outfield, he hasn't really played there much in the last couple of years. He only had 12 attempts, only had 37 attempts in the outfield all of last year, and he was +1 OAA. So I guess that's good enough.
Yeah,
so I guess he's just, again, fine fielder, can do it. 2023, he got a couple innings in center. Do you remember that?
Remember when Brett Baty went into left field for at the end of one of those games? I think that's when McNeil went into center.
Yeah, that might have been it.
We had the chess master himself, Buck Showalter, calling the shots.
That's
so
true.
He had to commit triple switches for no reason.
Yeah, you'll know what's up old Buck's sleeve.
He was like seventh inning, the Mets are winning. We got to pull everybody. We got to play these guys for 3 innings. All right, no more Buck talk. Next question here is from Yoshima, Professor Yoshima, legend. Juan Soto and Pete Alonso finished top 2 in NL MVP voting, even beating out Shohei. I love it, but there's just no fucking shot. There's no shit. If Juan Soto and Pete Alonso both finish 1-2, have there been teammates that have ever finished 1-2 in MVP voting? That feels almost impossible, because usually you kind of cancel each other out with votes. And in that world, that's crazy. I don't know how they could do it, so I am going to sell it, but I'll buy that one of those two finishes in the top 2 this year.
I'm pretty sure that when Jimmy Rollins stole the MVP award from David Wright in 2007, I think that Ryan Howard was also in the top 5. That's the last time I can remember 2 teammates in the top 5. I could be wrong about that. I'd also definitely check on some of those Yankee years with A-Rod and stuff, because I feel like they were just hitting the ball so
Ryan
damn
Howard
hard.
was 5th that year, so that is a good call.
It's crazy. I just nailed that.
That was disgusting.
Here's one reason I'll buy this to a degree. Not the fact that we'll have top two guys the MVP, but I do think that first of all, Shohei Ohtani can't keep getting away with this. There's no way he can go 50-50 again. And I think that one of the big reasons for that is that I just can't see him. Wow, Fangraphs right now is playing me an ad for Nelly, a Nelly concert. I'm just seeing Nelly.
I will say
on my
there are
computer right
so
now.
many times, by the way, that teammates have finished 1-3, like Prince Fielder, Ryan Braun. You've seen a couple of Yankees finish 1-3. There's a lot of 1-3s, but not 1-2 that I'm seeing right now in the 2010s onward.
Okay, that's a big one. But again, with Ohtani this year, apparently, again, I don't know if it's real yet, but the Dodgers are going to try and rehab him a bit as a pitcher as the season goes on. If he's going to be spending more time throwing and that's going to be affecting him, fatiguing him, and if he ever actually gets into games and pitches by the end of the season, but maybe in like a much less voluminous role. Voluminous? Yeah, voluminous.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, voluminous role. It could probably take him out of the lineup a few more days than he was last year. Not give him a chance to build up the same kind of gaudy counting stats they was able to last year. And again, I don't know if it's going to affect him. By the time you guys hear this episode, he might already have 1 or 2 home runs on the season because he'll already have started playing the games in Tokyo. It just that shoulder injury that he sustained in the World Series was not an unserious injury. It's amazing that he's even come back this quick and hit these home runs in the spring. But apparently, it has pushed him back off schedule a little bit in his rehab as a pitcher, just because he had to take extra time to now rehab that shoulder to be a hitter. So I do think there might be a couple more off days for Shohei Ohtani this year, which definitely could open the door for more Mets. I think mainly would be Soto and Lindor to jump into the MVP race.
Yeah, no, I listen. I do think Pete's going to have a monster year too, so I'm keeping him in the back burner too as like we got a 1-2. We got a 1-2. I found it. 2000 Jeff Kent Barry Bonds. When Barry Bonds for sure should have won the MVP, but Jeff Kent for some reason won it.
All right, well, yeah, shout out the Rathers for that one. But next question here. At Diana Marie with 3 Ys. David Peterson should be more in the conversation when we're talking about pitching aces for this season. Diana, I love where your head's at, and David Peterson was a monumentally important player for the Mets last season. But I think I do have to sell it. But I think I'm going to be buying back the fact that Peterson is a good starting pitcher and someone I'm confident in as a mid-rotation guy. But just David Peterson, he's never been able to demonstrate in his career the ability to strike a lot of hitters out and not walk many hitters at the same time. The kind of way an ace would need to, especially to get the type of especially when they don't get like the amazing opponent's quality of contact like Peterson's never really been able to get. So again, I trust David Peterson. Happy to have him in the rotation, but I do think that we're going to see some definite ERA regression from Peterson because he doesn't strike many guys out. He walks too many batters, and last year he got a little bit lucky with his home run rate.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is in the second half of the season, he was technically striking out more batters. He was striking out about 21%, where in the first half he was at 16%. But yeah,
still quite low.
Yeah, it's still low. It's not ace quality stuff. But what I will say is I really feel so good about David Peterson going into the year. I think he's going to surprise people and just be a really good pitcher again. He's not a guy that you're like, going up against the Dodgers, he's going to shut down that lineup. You don't feel like he's going to shut down the Phillies necessarily. But I just think he's going to be a really good pitcher again. That hip injury being fixed seems like it did something for him last year. And again, that second half, he was so good. And also, at the end of the day, the Mets win games when he's on the mound. Their record was phenomenal when he pitched in games last year. Sub-3 RAs, probably not realistic, but I think he can definitely be a 3.5, 3.4 guy again this year. Just looked really good. I'm high on David Peterson going into the season for sure.
If I had to set the full season ERA line for David Peterson, I think it would be around 3.85.
I'm taking the under. I'm smashing the under.
All right, I mean, I don't want to bet the over because I'm not going to be the Maloik for our guy, but I think that's just a fair place to think about David Peterson right now, based on where his skills are, where his peripherals are, like how low his home run rate last year was. I think he got a little bit lucky on batted balls, but that's okay because the Mets played really good defense.
Field too. That's kind of how it goes.
Well, I mean, he did give up a lot of home runs to Citi Field in the past. But again, I think you are right about the hip thing, the labrum thing. He did something that we talked about a lot last season that he also talked about that helped him was just simply sustaining velocity deeper into starts. Like he would kind of peak and then fall down. That's why he'd get hit much harder the third time through the order. He also is now crazily, shockingly, 3 years in a row, he's thrown 100 innings at the major league level, which I honestly can't believe looking at that right now on my computer. So maybe that is something else for Peterson to try and jump into that next level and like truly become a workhorse.
Here's a very specific one coming to us from LFGM25. Mets beat the Braves in the NLCS. I'm not quite sure how this happens. I'll tell you right now, I have in my predictions for the season, I have the Braves missing the playoffs. So I have to sell because I don't think they're going to make it. But if the Mets match up with the Braves in the NLCS, of course this is a buy. They're beating them.
I like that you stay very arbitrary on your YouTube channel. No bias at all. Braves missing the playoffs.
Never.
There's no way that team makes the playoffs.
Someone has to miss.
I think the Braves might be the second best team in baseball. I think they're way closer to the Dodgers than they are to most of the other teams are going to be fighting for those wild card spots. Especially seeing Spencer Strider pitch his first spring training game on Monday, and he looked like the best pitcher on planet Earth again. That's going to be something that we have to deal with.
Fucking clown shoes that he's wearing. Just when he pitches against the Mets, we'll absolutely crush him like we always do. Always hitting the ball over the fence 100 times.
One of the reporters asked Chris Sale about his expectations for the team, and said a big part of that was like getting Strider back because he's our best pitcher. When Chris Sale is calling you the best pitcher on his team, that means you're doing something right because that guy is crazy. But okay, moving on now. From Russian bot at Prizgovenyev. Diaz will lose.
What'd you say?
Prigozhin. That's
Nice.
the ad.
Honestly, you're reading it really well.
All right, I got good accents. Diaz will lose the closing gig. I simply have to sell that. I think Mets fans are too sour on Edwin Diaz last year. I think based on the way
there were so many of these in our replies. Edwin Diaz isn't going to be the closer. Edwin Diaz is going to have a down year. I'm like, what is going on? Why is everyone losing faith in Edwin Diaz? He had that rough spell during the middle of the season last year, there's no doubt. But you look at his numbers at the end of the year and you're like, oh, this is still one of the 5 best relievers in baseball.
So last year, of all qualified relievers in Major League Baseball, do you know how many had a higher strikeout rate than Edwin Diaz?
I'm going to say 4, and I'm going to guess it's going to be Mason Miller, AJ Puck, Cade Smith, and Tanner Scott.
All right, I'm going to tell you something hilarious. I think I'm incepting you because Edwin actually had the 4th highest strikeout minus walk rate.
Whoa.
And the only guys ahead of him were Mason Miller, AJ Puck, and Cade Smith. So that was a pretty incredible job by you. But in terms of just pure strikeout rate, because Edwin did struggle at times with the walks last year, he was second in the league, only behind Mason Miller. The stuff is still incredible. Even as bad as he was early in the season, the fact that his full season whip and ERA were 1.04 and 3.52 are simply astounding. And once we got to the end of the year, I know some of the moments were a little bit more tense than we hoped they would have, but he was fucking nails. And here's another crazy thing about Edwin Diaz. We're getting a little scared about Edwin Diaz last year. Josh Hader signed a similar super deal. Edwin got more strikeouts than Hader last year and allowed fewer runs than Josh Hader last year. So I think there's something that happens with closers because you're pitching such a short period of time. It's only one inning. A lot of shit can happen in one inning, especially a guy like Edwin, who's maybe sometimes doesn't have the best command. But this guy is still absolutely bona fide, one of the 5 best closers in baseball. And there's no concern at all about that for me.
Yeah, I mean, like his ERA being 3.5. We are a big anti who cares about the reliever ERA podcast over here. When he gave up that grand slam to Josh Bell, right? He gave up the grand slam to him. His ERA went from 3.5 to 5.5. Like it jumped 2 runs because he gave up a grand slam. That's why reliever ERA doesn't always paint the full picture. You have a 1 ERA, you're disgusting. We know that. But sometimes like a 3.5 is not a real 3.5.
I'll say this. I do think that was the low point of the season for me when he gave up that home run that Saturday afternoon.
I remember where I was. I was at shout out Mike Hughes. I was at his graduation party. You weren't there. You didn't make it out there. Mm-hmm. And again, shout out another Westfield guy, Justin, was talking to me. He's like, oh, nice win by the Mets. I was like, don't you fucking say that. I was like, don't you say that. It's over now. You just screwed us. Josh Bell seconds later hit a home run. And I was like, I hate you. I can't forgive you for this.
I was at a Solomon show. Shout out all of my techno music heads out there with my buddy Ryan, who I was talking about before. It was a great show at the Naval Yard in Brooklyn. Outside, it was like the first show of the summer, even though it was kind of like misty and rainy. But it was the first time like being outside the concert for the season. And as that inning was starting to get out of hand, we were like, we have to leave the crowd right now. We have to go watch the end of this game. And we pulled it up on my phone watching the last inning of that game and watching Josh Bell pelt that grand slam. We're like, all right, I guess season's over. And we went back to dancing and hanging out with our friends. But it all turned around from there. So I guess, again, this is another... What?
He gave up 21 earned runs on the season last year. 7 of those came in that Marlins game and the Diamondbacks game. A third of the runs that he gave up in the season came up in 2 games. He made 54 appearances. Like,
Ed, I'll say this: the Giants game, which I think was a week before that, were 2 additional runs.
Let me take a look. Game logs.
That blown save on a Saturday afternoon against the Giants.
Against the Giants, he gave up 1
home
run.
game against
one
the Giants.
Run there.
1 earned run. Okay, maybe it might have been an inherited run then. But I think again, it was just like It was 1 horrible month, and we flushed that one down the toilet, and then 2 really poorly timed blown saves. We're also giving home runs to 2 of the 10 best hitters in baseball.
Yeah, really good baseball players.
It's just like, I know it gets anecdotal with these closers, and a lot of Mets fans do have like rightful PTSD from what Edwin Diaz put us through his first year with this team.
If I can forgive, they can forgive.
Yeah. I'm very, in terms of things to be concerned with about this current Mets team, like Edwin Diaz not even close to the top of the list.
No, not even close. All right, we got one from our buddy Jordan Simpson. You guys should go follow him. Makes great music. And also, Knobwatch legend. He'll have it for us all year long. The Mets will tie for most All-Star selections in a season in franchise history, which is 5. So he doesn't think they're going to beat it, but he thinks the Mets are going to get 5 All-Stars. Can we pick those 5 All-Stars? So we got Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso. Do we think Edwin Diaz is probably one of them as being an elite closer? So now who's the 5th? It's going to be a battle between a Nimmo spot, a Pete spot, Holmes. Like there's I think that's totally in the realm of possibility. I think the Mets should have 5 All-Stars if things go right in the first half.
I just do wonder about. I mean, should's a huge word there. I wonder about how many first basemen are in the. I guess I'll always let Pete in if he wants to do the home run derby.
Fred,
But I think Pete's going to skip the home run derby this year. I have a feeling.
I pray to God he does. Please, Pete, don't do the home run derby again, man.
Yeah, but I think otherwise, I don't know. 5 still just seems like a lot for this team, especially unless a pitcher really puts themselves on the map to be an all-star, which I'm not sure if anybody will. Besides, I guess Clay Holmes.
Griffin Canning, don't forget him.
Griffin Canning, man, it was so special watching him today. The two slather variations that he was using, both him against left-handed and right-handed batters. We were hanging out at Rudy's after we did we got a fan of jersey for a giveaway that we did earlier in the offseason, and we were just sitting there like, wow, Griffin Canning, this is gonna be awesome. Can't wait for baseball to start. But moving on here, got the next question from @LI Mets fans, the great Enrico Palazzo. Max Kranick will be a shutdown reliever with a sub-3 ERA. I think that's a firm buy for me. I think Max Kranick has the opportunity to become one of the better relievers in the entire National League based on what we've seen this spring and where that stuff actually is. Like, he's someone that I think that we might have grown a monster here in Max Kranick.
Yeah, I'm super in. I'm, of course, going to be buying that one. Sometimes these pitchers are late bloomers, man, and there's a reason the Mets have kept this guy around. You heard Tim Healy talk about it when we had him on the podcast a couple weeks ago. The Mets have liked Kranick from the start. They were disappointed that he got hurt last year. They had plans for him. He was on the playoff roster. He made the playoff roster, having not thrown a single professional pitch for the New York Mets at the major league level. David Stearns has the vision, and in the spring, he's looked out of control good. I love it. I'm all in on the Max Kranick hype train. I'm buying that one as well, which leaves us to the last one, coming from King of Queens. What a legendary show. Pete Alonso will have a better season than Vlad Guerrero Jr., and you know what I'm going to say? Buy. I'm in. Here's why. Pete has to go off. He has to go astronomical. And I think you've mentioned it too on the podcast before. What'd you say? Keep an eye out, Hack Wilson, for your RBI record or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like, if he's hitting behind Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto, those guys get on base 35% of the time and 40% of the time. He is going to have those guys up in front of him every single day. How do you not drive in 120 runs minimum in a healthy season?
I've shouted that before, but there's a great article that Mike Petriello wrote last offseason when Ohtani was picking his team. They were talking about better or worse supporting cast for him and like the concept of lineup protection. And he found that it was more helpful for a batter to have guys on base ahead of them while they were at the plate than have theoretically like a strong hitter behind them. He regressed it. He reduced it. It was a really good research article. Check it out on Baseball Savant, LMB.com. But I think that the best thing for Pete, like you just said, is the fact that he's incredibly high percentage of his at-bats here is going to have someone on base ahead of him. And that could do such wonders for a hitter. The pitcher's a little bit distracted. One of those two guys is going to steal a lot of bases. Even I was looking at some stats this week. Soto steals like 5-10 bases a year too. It's not nothing, but just the fact that the pitcher's also going to have to go through a war just to get to Pete Alonso. Those at-bats against Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto are not easy at-bats. They're two of the hardest hitters to set down in the entire league. We've seen Francisco Lindor time and time again in big situations work bad counts into walks, work a pitcher's count into a hitter's count, foul off pitches, get after it. Like we're already seeing it in spring training, but it's going to be a treat to watch Juan Soto just work in the box this year. He does such crazy things to pitchers, gets in their head, guesses right. Like he's a freak. By the time Pete Alonso gets up, the pitcher's going to be huffing and puffing. It's going to be sweat dripping down his face, and it's going to give him a meatball. It's going to go into his 15th row.
There's going to be a couple games this year, not often, but there's going to be a couple games where Pete Alonso is going to, his first pitch of the game to him is going to be the 20th pitch of the inning, which is like insane to say out loud. But like, the Petriello article was awesome because it really did like made a light bulb go off in my head, because I was definitely of the thing of like, you need to have guys behind someone. That's your protection, because now they have to pitch to you because the guy behind you is better. But when you have people on base, they have nowhere to put you. They don't want to put more guys on base. They have to throw strikes to you. They have to attack. And for Pete, who's been chasing a lot the last few years, that's been the thing that's really affected his game. More pitches in the strike zone means more damage being done. I love to see it. I think he's going to go off.
The other thing that's really affected Pete's game is just not making as much hard contact. So maybe this actually could work against him because the fact that, I only have to hit a single, because we want Pete Alonso thinking home run. Yes. I want Pete Alonso thinking long ball, big fly, hit the ball as hard as he fucking can.
That's why he gets paid.
So, yeah. So I don't know. I think that it's just such an opportunity for him this year. I also think that one year, have the first try at the contract year, I think he knows it didn't go very well.
Yes.
So I think that he's very aware of that. And I think Pete is just, one, he's a fierce competitor. Two, he's an incredible professional athlete. I think he is going to have, I don't know how else to put this, like the eye of the tiger this year to just completely dominate. Like the opportunity is great. He came back to this team, said, because he wanted to be a part of this team. He's going to be one of the most central cogs of that team in the middle of the order. Like if there's a walk and a base hit in the first inning and then Pete Alonso hits a double in the gap, That's it.
Sick.
You it's like 70% chance you win that game now. Like we can like put teams to sleep early based on this lineup. I think Pete knows that he's the central actor in that.
Do you remember during the Jose Reyes leadoff days where they were like when Jose Reyes scored the first run of the game for the Mets, which was like an insanely high amount? Like they won like 80% of those games. It's so important to get out early, get ahead early, and that 1-2-3 gives the Mets a really good, maybe the second or third best line 1-2-3 in all of Major League Baseball. So they have a lot of opportunity to score early and often, which I love. That being said, here's what I'll just counter argue myself here. Vlad's going to have a higher OPS. I think there's no doubt about that. But I think Pete could win on the counting numbers, which that's truthfully, I'll be very happy if he hits more home runs and drives in more RBIs.
The Blue Jays are also a team that I think they're probably like they have a decent roster. They're a fine baseball team, but I think in terms of all of the teams that have at least some playoff aspirations this year, I think they relatively have a very high bust potential of things possibly going wrong. And I think there is a world where that Blue Jays season does become, I don't think it's likely, but I think it's a chance that Blue Jays season could become a bit of a disaster. And if the season becomes a disaster, then it's kind of hard. I mean, last year their season was a disaster as well.
Scherzer's already not feeling good, right?
Yeah, he's got his thumb going on there. Yeah. I mean, it just means Jake Bloss time. All that means is Jake Bloss time. And I know that Jake Bloss is the ace that was promised, but I do think that team is in a strange spot, and I think that I don't know who's going to feel more pressure to have a good season, Vlad or everybody around Vlad, to make sure they can try to find a way to keep Vlad, because they're in terms of every organization in baseball right now, they're in one of the strangest situations, I think.
It's so weird. I mean, we could talk about the weird Blue Jay stuff going on for hours, but that's it. That's buy or sell. Those are all the questions that we chose and deemed worthy. No, I'm just kidding. You guys gave us 120, and we can't answer all 120. And to be fair, there's a lot of repeats. So whichever ones I picked, I'm sorry if I didn't pick yours. You can blame me. Don't blame James. He had nothing to do with this. But yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on all our social media at Mets'd. Subscribe to the Mets'd Podcast YouTube channel. Like I said, we're trying to get to 10K, so we really would appreciate that. And if you're listening to us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, drop us a rating, drop us a review, download, and subscribe. We have a great interview coming out with Zach Scott later this week, probably on Thursday. Former GM of the Mets. You guys know him. You see him all over SNY, so make sure you are sticking around so you see that. You can follow James on his YouTube channel. I think that's what we're going to keep plugging, right? Keep plugging the YouTube.
Oh, yeah, definitely keep plugging YouTube. James Shiano, I'm doing a lot of fantasy baseball content on there. I've done rankings for every single position. Outfield's going to be coming out later today, and then we're going to start doing some sleepers, a couple sleeper videos before we get to opening day next week. Real opening day, not Japan opening day.
Go subscribe to him over there, and I'm Draftnik Mark with a C. Thank you guys for listening and watching. We'll catch you all in the next episode. Peace.
Peace out, guys. Let's go Mets.